everybody, and welcome to my podcast. My name is Jake Ames, and I hope to captivate your attention with what I have to say in regard to gender politics, especially in their complex nature and how women are elected. The prominent women in politics, such as Nancy Pelosi, are an incredibly big deal, though there is very few of them when compared to men. As we all know, there is a major gap between men and women in government, and which is due to a plethora of reasons. Today's topic concerns one of these many reasons, being the barriers present for women running for office being financial and social barriers, along with their electability if they are presented the opportunity to run for office. The barriers are seen when initially wanting to run for office. The main barrier seen is due to funding for campaigns. It is quite expensive for anyone to run for office, so women struggle with this far more as they are less likely to not only have the money to run for elected office, but are also far less likely to retain donations due to the far less likelihood of women donating to political campaigns. Electability, while a barrier in itself, is far more complex in how it plays into U.S. politics. Electability is essentially the ability of a particular candidate to garner party and voter support as a means of being sufficient enough to be elected. The error of electability, however, is that it favors a majority that does not take into consideration of the wants of women and minorities. That in turn leads to candidates who are not minorities, in most cases men, being far more electable as they can further fit with the needs and wants of the majority party support. In this podcast, I hope to not only shed light on this issue of it being marginally harder for women to be elected, let alone even run for office, but I hope to also learn more myself of the issue at hand through my upcoming... With me today, I have my older sister, Amanda Ames, a biomedical research doctoral student at the University of Michigan, along with a prominent woman in science with high aspirations. How are you today, Amanda?
Hi, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's good to have you. I hope to ask you some questions to shed light on the barriers of women running for office, along with women being less electable in the eyes of party and majority voter interest. Are you ready for me to ask these questions?
Sure.
Okay, question number one. What is your opinion on the current place that women hold in elected offices and the overall power they hold in policymaking?
So I think when you look at the recent exciting advancements women have made in politics in the past few years,
Yeah.
it's very exciting. You know, we have our first female vice president. We're seeing the number of women in Congress and the House increasing. So overall, like seeing growth, seeing more representation is a positive thing. However, when you consider that women make up half of our country and they're still only having 25% of the representation in government, there clearly still is a problem there. And we really do hope to see change. And it's actually, we see a similar scenario in academia as well, especially in the sciences where it's historically a male dominated field. We're starting to see more and more women in an academic setting, but it's going to take quite a while for us to catch up and truly have that representation in our field.
I learned something in my class. Apparently up until the 1980s, medical research was only done on men.
Yes.
And they just assumed women would be the same. So
that's another really good point. A lot of what we know about diseases, mental health, symptoms, reactions to certain medications, we only really know, or like the traditional signs that you would look for are what is seen in men. So we're finding now women are getting diagnosed later in life with certain things because their symptoms are completely different in some cases.
Yeah. Who do you believe is the most influential female politician and how they represent and impact women's interests in government? And how were they able to be so successful in achieving elected office?
So I think this is a really interesting question. And as a woman in science, I'm constantly thinking about what I can do to be the most influential as I can be, and ultimately to promote the most change that I can in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest things that you can do as a leader to influence others is to just lead by example, be a good role model, have a prominent platform. And so the woman who comes to mind when I think about that in our government is AOC.
Yeah.
She's very outspoken. She's young. She has a really strong presence on social media. She utilizes her platform to its entirety, and there's no like gray area in the incentives and policies that she cares about. She makes it very clear what her priorities are, and she's constantly advocating for those things and for the people that those things would impact.
Yeah.
So I just think that she's an incredible role model, an incredible leader. And by having such a strong presence on social media, she's inherently more accessible.
Yeah.
So people who may not have I'm not super like politically knowledgeable because my expertise is in science, but I'm very familiar with the things that she's trying to do because she's just very prominently on my social media, in the news, just really doing her best and fighting or like creating new norms.
Yeah. And it was quite a fight for her to get into the office, from what I've learned.
Right. She really she set a precedent. Like no one has ever done what she has done, let alone a woman.
Yeah.
So it's and those kinds of scenarios are what are going to inspire younger women and younger women from all types of backgrounds, or even minorities, not even just women, like people who just come from disadvantaged backgrounds, that those kinds of ambitious futures aren't as accessible.
Yeah.
Those are the people that are going to be inspired by her more
Yeah.
so than the average politician.
Yeah. And this kind of segues into our next question, question 3. What is your opinion on the mere ability to run for office requiring a need for mass financial resources, and how has this adversely impacted women with the ambition of running for office?
So this is actually something I was not familiar with. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that you're referring to the need for fundraising and just the need to have a large financial platform to base a campaign on.
Yeah, so pretty much just it's like the simplest way to put it. It's kind of like men are more likely to have more money than women, and it's easier to run for office in that way. And also women who would in turn support women are also way less likely to donate to political campaigns. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of hard to feed these financial resources.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of factors that play into this and why this creates a disadvantage for women. And one major factor that it's coming to mind for me is just the societal expectations of women that inherently make them less financially capable of doing these types of things.
Yeah.
Despite, you think of the average family household, I would say it's become much more commonplace now to have both a husband and a wife working and contributing financially to the household and to support children, but there's still a much larger responsibility on women to support children. And just the idea that a woman would be able to not only like fundraise and come up with the funds to run a campaign, but then also take an extended amount of time,
Yeah.
presumably away from her family, to run that campaign, it's just, in my mind, inherently more inaccessible until those societal expectations start to shift a bit more to support a ambitious, career-driven woman.
Yeah.
I was going to say something else, and now I'm blanking. Additionally, like, you have to think about the fact that women got rights later than men, whether it's the right to vote, the right to own property, the right to have their own bank account. And granted, now, like, those things are all accessible to women, but I kind of think of it as we're playing catch up, right? Like, regardless, men will always have this head start on their finances, head start on, being able to have assets.
Yeah.
And so inherently those things are still inaccessible to women.
Yeah.
Just because those were not rights that women had until much later than men.
Yeah.
So I think we're still seeing society catching up with that, even though, modern day society, we're not seeing inequalities to the same extreme, but those inequalities are still present.
Yeah. It's all about shifting the societal norms to actually deal with those inequalities that are there.
Right. Yeah.
And that brings us to our next question. Since you have more of a science background, I'm not sure how well you can answer this one, but I feel that you can try your best. Question 4. What are feminist philosophical ideals that play a great role in how women's interests are portrayed and addressed in politics?
Yeah, so I will give it my best shot. And I think the best thing for me to do is to continue to draw parallels between women and academics, because again, I feel like there's a lot of similarities in the dynamic of expectations and just frustrating things that women deal with as they're entering a workforce or a career that has been male dominated so traditionally. So the main philosophical ideals.
Ideals.
That's the right word. Philosophical ideals of feminism is just that women are equal in every way, societally, economically, and politically as well. So essentially, there's a completely even playing field.
Yeah.
And going off of, again, just having to play catch up with historical inequalities, we're still seeing the impact of that. So in order for women to truly achieve feminist ideals in politics, in society, to shift to support that. But I will say, like, there are some more specific examples that come to mind is there are aspects of a woman's life that are just inherently a part of their identity, regardless on how relevant it is to their career. An example of that is motherhood. Like, most female politicians, for whatever reason, it's public knowledge whether or not they have children, how many children they have, and it's appropriate for the media or for fellow politicians to bring up how many children they have or how they balance their family life and career. And that's just acceptable. Whereas, like, those same questions just would never get asked to a man. Like, you aren't going to ask a random senator whether or not he makes enough time for his kids.
Yeah.
But nearly every female politician or government official, it's just something that's, for whatever reason, idealized.
Yeah.
I feel like I lost my train of thought. Additionally, when you look at female politicians, there is a tendency to sort of villainize them
Yeah.
by exaggerating traits that, again, are really only pointed out in women.
Yeah.
Whether it's being loud or trying to create a scandal based off like dancing a certain way, or
Yeah.
a popular thing that Hillary Clinton was criticized for was the fact that she stayed with Bill Clinton even though he cheated on her.
Yeah.
And like, what kind of woman would do that? Whereas like those types of things are just never even brought to a professional platform with men.
No, yeah, they're never even discussed. And I know another example with like a lot of people thought Elizabeth Warren was shrill, and they also
Yeah.
thought that with Hillary Clinton too. And you never hear a man described that way. It's only women.
Right. Yeah. And I actually had got a similar type of feedback from an older white male professor after
Yeah.
I gave a seminar. He was criticizing me that I don't think he used the word shrill, but he basically said that I was too overwhelming, that I, was too excited, too enthusiastic, and it was just overwhelming for him to be sitting in the front row with that much, me giving off that much energy. And
Yeah.
again, like no one would ever give that kind of feedback to a man.
Yeah.
And I really just wanted to be like, then move to the back row.
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, and I actually was reading or listening to a podcast, I think, about the root of some of those biases. And again, it's because, especially in male dominated fields, but in the workforce in general, where women have been underrepresented for so long,
Yeah.
our ways of communicating, our tone, are perceived as not professional because men are used to listening to other men talk,
Yeah.
So again, it's really just coming back to change and changing the perception, and honestly not allowing that kind of environment or those kind of like microaggressive behaviors to persist.
Yeah. No, I
And
absolutely agree.
yeah, just recognizing how being in that kind of environment over time is inherently oppressive to women and makes keeping up in this professional environment more difficult unnecessarily.
All right. And that brings us to our final question. Question 5. What are some things that can be done to not only remove the barriers of finance and electability in women running for office, but also overall to ensure that women can hold a bigger influence in the US government?
Yeah, so this is a hard question because I don't think it's an easy fix.
Yeah.
I think the most valuable resource we have is time, and things like this take time. It's not just going to happen one election cycle that all of a sudden we're going to have the representation and platform and influence in government that women deserve. With that being said, we still have a responsibility and the opportunity to take an active role, and it's going to be that active participation over time and advocation and leading by example that's going to cultivate an environment where women have a platform and representation in government.
Yeah.
In terms of like financial barriers, again, like until we have equal pay and equal societal expectations, that is always going to be a barrier.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there is one solution for that other than just continuing to advocate for it and continuing to prioritize it and continuing to not allow the current political climate to prevent our progress in diversifying Congress and having representation.
Yeah. And that's also a problem of electability too, which electability, to remind the listeners, is essentially it's a system where pretty much the wants of the majority are favored in a candidate. And unfortunately, with our current political climate, those happen to be men and are not often women or minorities. So that usually leaves women and minorities, someone such as AOC, being less electable than any white male, for example.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's probably the biggest obstacle we face, is that regardless of having incredible, exceptional female candidates that would be incredible congresswomen and or even president, our society still has a long way to go.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Like, even I would say it's not even just like men not voting for women. It's women as well. Like, I feel like there's just this societal expectation that we're not ready for a female president.
Yeah.
And it really super frustrating.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
And when I think about it, even when we get our first female president, which there's really no excuse why we haven't had a female or a woman president yet.
Yeah.
But again, let's say she's the 47th or 48th president of the United States. There are literally 47 men that had the opportunity before her. So how long are we then going to see, or how long is it going to take for that influence and that representation of women in government to propagate?
Yeah. Well, Amanda, I thank you for your time and insight. Do you have any concluding thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think there's actually one thing I wanted to add.
Okay.
This is referencing women in academia, and I think it can also be applied to women in
politics.
Women in politics, women running for office as well. As even though, so for example, if you were to look at the average like biology PhD program in the country, we're starting to see women representation like at the undergraduate and the graduate level really increasing. In some cases, women are making up 60% of the graduate students in a doctoral biology program, which is exciting. Yet we're not seeing that reflected in higher, like as you would progress in that career path. So if you were to take that traditional academic career path where you then get your PhD, you do a postdoctoral position, and then you end up as a professor, that representation or that women majority doesn't make it to that professor level, because all of these challenges that women face make women more likely to choose different career paths. So whether it's financial obligation, familial obligation, or just dealing with just career obstacles that are specific to women, they don't have the equal opportunity to succeed in their career path the same way.
Yeah.
And so I think that is also what we see in politics as well, where the issue isn't women who are talented enough, ambitious enough. It's just financial and societal obstacles that are really holding us back.
Yeah. Well, again, I thank you for your time, and I hope that you have a good day.
Thanks for
Nice
having
talking to you,
me. Yes,
Amanda.
this was fun.
All righty. Well, as we can see, the issue of the gender gap in politics spews from barriers of running for office along with the inability for women to be equally electable. Thanks to the insight of my older sister, Amanda Ames, we can now see that a similar trend is seen in academia, in which, because of this similar trend, most women with professional aspirations can relate to such a dilemma. Women are growing slowly to holding more power in government than has ever been seen before, though there is still far more that can be done to ensure that women's interests are being represented adequately. Many of the issues of gender politics are well ingrained into society, in which all aspects from the government to the people themselves must take the proper steps to make women play a more crucial role in politics. As seen throughout, the notion of women in U.S. politics being few and far between is not just an issue of women not wanting to run for politics, but being inherently stunted in this regard when compared to a man with the same ambitions. This is not only seen with the lack of women holding office, but also women's interests being represented and at times being reversed. An example of such being reversed is that of the stance against women's bodily integrity by the want to overturn Roe v. Wade with the state abortion bans. But that's a topic for another day. I thank everyone for listening and wish you all a wonderful day and hope you learned of this immense issue. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you, everybody.